Greetings, salutations, hello! It is that time again, that question time, that dreadlock question and answer time, where I answer dreadlock related questions that have been submitted to me by you fine people, and I try to answer them in a sort of satisfactory manner. First question this week is from Betz. Question, is it recommended to wash your locks/knots the same night as adding new ones or putting ones back in that washed out? I recommend washing your hair the day that you're going to put in the dreads, or at least the night before. This is because you're not going to want to wash brand new dreadlocks for at least a few days. So you put in the new dreadlocks and then you're going to want to wait at least 5, preferably maybe more like 7, before you give them their first wash. This is going to give them the best chance of not washing out. Washing can be quite rough on very young dreadlocks, and therefore giving them those few days is going to increase the likelihood that they're going to hold up, which, you know, that's what you want. So you're going to want to wash the hair pretty close to the starting of the dreadlocks, because this means that you won't have to wait quite so long between washes. So if you wash the hair on the day that you start the dreadlocks and you wait 5 days before you give the dreadlocks themselves the first wash, it means you only have to go 5 days without washing your hair. Whereas if you don't wash them that day, if you haven't washed your hair for a few days before you even start, for one, your hair is already going to be a little bit greasy, and that's not great for making dreadlocks with. And it also means that you're going to have to then wait even longer between washes, and it's just not all that fun. Next question is from Dee Holmes. What's your take on freeform locks? Do they grow slower than maintained dreads? Whether you've gone freeform, natural organic, or back home, or twist and rip, or highly maintained crochet, your hair is going to be growing at the same speed. So everything is coming out at the same rate. But you can see different rates of growth in the actual dreadlocks, and this is because if you really heavily maintain the dreadlocks, so if you start a dreadlock here on this side of your head and really go to town with it with the crochet hook and get it super tight as you will possibly go, that dreadlock will be shrunk up and tight right from the very start. It will be super tight and, you know, solid. That's not really what I recommend to do, but you can get it all shrunk up and tight right from day one. Whereas if you're going neglect on this side, natural, freeform, whatever you want to call it, it's not going to be tight from day one. It's going to be loose hair, and then it's going to slowly sort of section off and then very slowly shrink up and tighten and shrink up and tighten. So you will see the dreadlocks growing at different rates, because from day one, this one's going to be super shrunk up and tight, and therefore it's going to be able to start growing pretty much from day one because the hair continues to grow. Whereas this hair on this side, which would be going natural neglect, that started off long and it's shrinking up slowly, shrinking up slowly. So this one's growing, this one's shrinking. The hair is all growing at the same rate, but the actual sort of movement within the dreadlock, the locking up, is happening at different rates, and so changing the rate at which the dreadlocks gain length. John O'Sullivan asks, hey Christian, I was wondering how your girlfriend finds your dreadlocks and if she herself is a dreadhead. Have relationships in your experience been affected either positively or negatively by having dreadlocks at all? Thanks. My girlfriend is not a dreadhead. She was a dreadhead when we first met in person, and then I took hers out for her a few years ago. I'm setting a very bad example by removing dreadlocks from people. That's not what I should be doing. So she was a dreadhead, and I will say that the relationship was pretty positively impacted by her having dreadlocks, because we only met through dreadlocks. My girlfriend, before she was my girlfriend, saw me online. I have a picture with dreadlocks, and she was considering dreadlocks, and so came to me for help and advice regarding dreadlocks. And so if I had not had dreadlocks, if I had not had a picture of myself with dreadlocks, we would have never even come into contact with each other. We would have never met. And so relationship has been highly dependent on the fact that I had dreadlocks. It would be kind of hypocritical of her as an ex-dreadhead to take a sort of negative stance on dreadlocks. Well, me having them. And I had them when we first met, so it's no surprise or anything. And since this is the only relationship that I have ever been in, I can say that 100% of my relationships have been positively affected by having dreadlocks. Jerome Lopez asks, is it safe for young dreadlocks to get dyed? Lots of people dye their hair, lots of people dye their dreadlocks. You can dye dreadlocks. But a really common question is, how old should your dreadlocks be before you dye them? There is no sort of one size fits all, wait until this number of hours before you dye your dreadlocks. Changing the color of your dreadlocks is not going to be a problem. The problem is the rinsing of excess dye. When you dye or bleach dreadlocks, you paint it onto the outside. You don't need to soak the whole dreadlock, no one can see the hairs on the inside. So you paint it on, pretty simple. It's a bit boring and annoying, but easy enough to do. The problem comes when you have to rinse off the excess. Obviously this is super important if it is bleach that you have on your hair, because you don't want to leave that in there any longer than is necessary, otherwise it can really damage and destroy the hair. So if you've got some bleach that's soaked into the dreadlock, you really got to wash it all out. So there's a lot of rinsing, a lot of washing to get everything out and be sure that everything's out. All the rinsing and washing can be pretty rough on young dreadlocks. Anyone who has young dreadlocks will know that when they go in the shower and wash their hair, when they come out, the dreadlocks do kind of look kind of frizzy and mad, and you've got loose hair that you didn't really have there before the wash. So I'm sure you can imagine if you had to maybe rinse your hair for like 20 minutes straight to be sure that you've got all your bleach or dye out, it's not going to make your young dreadlocks all that happy. So I say to people, if you're gonna dye your hair, if you're gonna bleach your hair, that's perfectly fine. I'm not gonna tell anyone not to dye or bleach their hair. Just be aware of how rough the washing and rinsing for all that time can be, and if you are confident that your dreadlocks are at the stage where they can deal with that. So if you have super mature dreadlocks, you can be as rough with the washing as you want, and it's not really gonna have any negative effect. If you have really young dreadlocks, you may want to wait a little bit until you are confident that your dreadlocks are at a stage where they're not going to be completely messed up by all the washing and rinsing that is going to be required. Aarohee Aldas asks, how soon into the dreading stage should I use moisturizers, essential oils? Is it only when they're mature, or is it okay to use them at any point? There are no strict rules. You can put essential oils on whatever hair you like, but you have to be aware that oils are lubricating. Often with young dreadlocks, people will try and have their hair at least slightly on the drier side, because drier hair is going to knot up faster. It's going to be more inclined to form knots and lock up. This is the opposite to well moisturized, slightly oily hair. And so there's a balance. It depends on your hair. If you have particularly dry hair, then you're not going to want to use anything that's going to dry it any further, and maybe you want to use oils. If you already have pretty oily hair that is not locking all that well, adding extra oils is probably not what you want to do. So just like with the dyeing, it's going to depend on your hair and the stage that your dreadlocks are at, and whether you are comfortable with the effects that you're going to get. I will say that in a mist spray, so just a little spray bottle with essential oils in that you spray on, that's not going to have a huge impact because you don't have a lot of oil in that spray. It's pretty dilute when you shake it up, and it's only going to land on the outside of the dreadlock, so you're not going to see a sort of massive problem with applying that. Where it does come into play a little bit more is in dreadlock soaks, a deep clean, because you can end up putting quite a lot of oil in there, and that soaks into the dreadlock, gets all on the roots and things. That's great for older dreadlocks that are a little bit drier, a little bit tougher, that want to be softened, but if you are using that on really young dreadlocks, it can soften them more than you want. It can sort of lubricate the loose hair, so they're going to be less inclined to form new knots that you're wanting them to do when you have young dreadlocks. And it can be especially problematic if you are doing something like natural neglect, where you just have straight hair and you're really wanting it to section off and knot up, and if you're adding extra oils, it's really not going to help there. Those are my questions for this week. If you have any questions that you would like to ask me in my dreadlock Q&A, you can either leave them down in the comment section, write question at the start of the comment, and it will go into the queue, or you can join the Lazy Dreads Facebook page at facebook.com/lazydreads, and each week I ask the Q&A questions. Whichever question gets the most likes on that status before the next video gets filmed will get answers straight away that week, no waiting. If you liked this video, if it was helpful, it was fun, you can like it. If you'd like to see more from me in the future, you can of course subscribe. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you again soon. Farewell!